Click on the subscribe button to subscribe to our channel, like and share this video, and engage in our comments. When I first met Mr. Fletcher, I thought he looked too proud to ever need help. He had that kind of presence, tall, broad-shouldered even in old age, with sharp blue eyes that watched you like he was reading your thoughts before you even spoke. But age has a way of humbling even the strongest, and when his health started to slip, they brought me in to care for him. I was just the nurse, a private one, live-in. They needed someone reliable. My agency said I was the best. His son Andrew was the one who handled all the arrangements. I still remember the first time he walked into the room. He had the same posture as his father, but looked like someone who smiled a lot more easily. A bit of grey dusting his temples, wedding ring on his finger, and eyes that flicked over me for just a second too long. Not in a rude way, more like curiosity. I'm used to those looks. You get them when you're an immigrant woman with an accent people can't place, and you walk into a rich white family's home like you belong there. He was kind though, too kind maybe. I noticed it in the way he always asked if I'd eaten, if I was settling in okay, if I missed home. Most people don't ask those things unless they're genuinely interested, or unless they're starting to see you as more than just the help. I didn't think much of it until the second week. We'd fallen into a rhythm, me and Mr. Fletcher. He was stubborn but charming, the kind of man who didn't like pity but didn't mind the company. And when Andrew visited, which was often, he started lingering a little longer after his father had gone to bed. He'd stand near the kitchen counter while I washed dishes, sipping from a bottle of wine he'd brought, asking questions about South Africa, about my husband, about how I ended up here. I always answered politely, briefly. I kept the line clear. I wasn't naive. But one night I turned around and he was just standing there, not saying anything, just looking at me. I remember drying my hands slowly, suddenly too aware of how quiet the house was. Mr. Fletcher had gone to bed early. The hallway light was off. Only the dim glow of the kitchen lamp lit the space between us. "I don't know how you do it," he said finally, voice low. "This job, taking care of someone so closely, it must feel like you're always giving and no one's giving anything back." I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe because it felt like more than just a comment, like something was hiding behind it. I laughed softly and shook my head. "It's just work. You get used to it." But he didn't laugh. He stepped just a little closer. Not enough to make it obvious, just enough for me to feel it. The heat of him, the weight of his presence. And for the first time since I'd taken the job, I felt something shift. Something I didn't expect. Not from him, not from me. Before it could go any further, I turned and started wiping down the counter. Pretended not to notice the silence behind me. A few seconds later, I heard his footsteps moving away, then the front door clicking shut. But I didn't sleep well that night, and not because Mr. Fletcher needed anything. It was Andrew, and the way he looked at me like I was the one who needed saving. The days that followed were quiet on the surface, but I could feel the change underneath everything. Andrew still came by every other day to check on his father. He brought groceries sometimes, or asked if we needed anything for the house. He was always polite, always respectful, but I could feel it in the way his eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't looking. The pauses in our conversations, the silence that lingered just a beat too long before he said goodbye. I kept my focus on Mr. Fletcher. He'd taken a liking to me, and I liked him too, gruff and proud as he was. He reminded me of the men in my own family growing up. He never liked help, never wanted pity, but every now and then he'd say things that made me wonder what he'd been like in his younger days. "My son was never like me," he said once as I helped him into his chair. "Too sensitive, too hungry for approval." I didn't say anything, but I thought about that word. Hungry. It felt right. One Thursday afternoon, it rained hard. Thunder rolled over the hills, and the whole house felt closed in. Mr. Fletcher had fallen asleep in his recliner after lunch. I was wiping down the kitchen counters again when I heard the front door open. Andrew, soaking wet, jacket clinging to his frame, shirt damp against his chest. He looked surprised to see me in the kitchen, though I knew he wasn't. "Storm came out of nowhere," he said, shaking out his coat. "Had to pull off and wait for a bit. Figured I might as well come check on you both." I nodded. "Your father's asleep." He hung his coat by the door and stepped inside, water dripping slightly from his shoes onto the hardwood floor. I reached for a towel and crouched down to wipe it up, not realizing how close he was until I stood up and turned around and nearly bumped into him. For a second, we were face to face, too close. I stepped back instinctively, but he didn't move. "You always look so calm," he said, voice quiet, "even in the middle of all this." I gave him a polite smile. "You get used to it." He didn't take his eyes off me. "That's what you said before. You always say that." I felt the air shift, like the storm outside had moved into the room with us. I opened my mouth to say something, to change the subject, but before I could, he stepped closer. Not a full step, just enough for my breath to catch. "You ever feel like you've gotten so used to being strong, you forget what it's like to let someone take care of you for once?" That stopped me. Because yes, I had, but it wasn't the kind of thing you admit out loud, especially not to your patient's son. Especially not when your wedding ring still leaves a mark on your finger even after you've taken it off for the night. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My pulse was in my throat, and I could feel my body betraying me in the smallest ways. My shoulders tightening, my fingers curling around the edge of the towel, still in my hand. Andrew exhaled slowly. "I shouldn't say that. I know." He turned away like he was about to leave the room, but he didn't. Instead, he walked to the sink and stood there facing away from me, hands resting on the edge of the counter. His voice was low when he spoke again. "I'm not trying to make things complicated. I see how hard you work, how you take care of him, how quiet you are. You've got this strength in you, and I notice. It would have been easier if he had said something crude, something I could dismiss, but he didn't. He was careful and kind, and that made it worse. I took a step back. I needed space, air. "I should check on your father," I said quickly, but as I moved toward the hallway, I felt it, his hand lightly brushing against mine, not grabbing, not holding, just enough to make me stop. I turned to look at him, and for a brief, wild moment, I didn't see a married man standing in front of me. I saw someone who looked at me like I wasn't invisible, like I wasn't just the nurse in the background of someone else's life. But I couldn't afford that, not here, not with him. So I said nothing. I pulled away and walked down the hall. Later that night, after Mr. Fletcher had gone to bed, I sat in my room with the lights off, staring at the wall, heart still beating too fast. I could still feel the way Andrew looked at me, still hear his voice in the quiet, and I knew this wasn't over. Whatever was building between us, it wasn't going away. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my husband, about how we met back in Johannesburg when I was still in nursing school. He used to wait for me outside my evening classes with a takeout box in one hand and that goofy smile on his face. We'd sit on a campus bench and eat chicken curry, laughing about nothing. We didn't have much back then, but it felt like enough. He was the one who convinced me to take the job abroad, said it was just for a few years, said it would set us up for something better. But 5 years became 8. And now I'm here, tending to a house that isn't mine, caring for a man who barely speaks, while my own marriage sits quiet and worn, like old furniture no one bothers to dust anymore. I don't know when I started feeling like a shadow. I just know I did. The next time Andrew came by, it was late. The sun had already dipped behind the hills, and I was in the kitchen finishing the dishes. Mr. Fletcher was asleep again. He'd been tired all day, barely touched his dinner. I heard Andrew's knock on the back door this time, quiet, like he didn't want to wake the house. When I opened it, I saw him standing there in a dark coat, looking almost nervous. "I know it's late," he said, "but I couldn't stop thinking about the other day, about you." I stood still, my hands still damp from the sink. The air between us wasn't thick, it was charged, and something in me knew this wasn't just a passing moment anymore. This was the line. He stepped inside slowly, the way he looked at me. It wasn't like before. This time there was something raw behind his eyes, not just desire, something deeper. Maybe guilt, maybe longing, maybe both. "I don't expect anything," he said, voice low. Can I sit with you, just for a while?" It was such a simple request, so innocent on the surface, but nothing about it felt harmless. Still, I nodded. I led him to the small table in the corner of the kitchen where I usually had my tea in the evenings. We sat there in silence for a long time, just breathing. Then he said, "When my mom died, this house went quiet for a long time. Dad shut down." I didn't know how to be around him, so I stayed away. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the table, fingers tapping lightly against the wood. "I used to think she was the glue holding everything together," he continued. "Without her, I never really felt like I belonged here. Even now, when I come by, it's like I'm just visiting." I watched him carefully. He wasn't just talking to me, he was unraveling in front of me. "I envy you," he said suddenly, turning toward me. "The way you move in this house, the way you bring life back into it. You remind me of her sometimes, the quiet way you care." I felt the words settle deep in my chest. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to say the wrong thing and break whatever fragile moment was hanging in the air. "I'm not her," I whispered. "I know," he said. "You're something else entirely." Then came the silence again, but this one was different. It pulsed, it grew. He reached out across the table, slowly, and this time he didn't just brush my hand. He rested his over mine, warm, solid. I should have pulled away. I knew that. I knew what this looked like, what it could become, but I didn't move. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like a nurse or a wife or a woman weighed down by years of distance and compromise. I felt seen. I felt wanted. "I think about you more than I should," he said, his voice almost breaking. "I know this is wrong. I know it." And still, neither of us moved. I don't know how long we sat there like that. Minutes, hours. At some point, I stood up, trying to pull myself out of the gravity between us. He followed, rising too quickly, like he wasn't ready to let the moment go. I turned away, pretending to straighten the dish towel on the counter, pretending like my heart wasn't racing. And then I felt him behind me, close, but not touching. His breath was soft against my neck. "I don't want to ruin anything," he whispered. "But if you ever needed someone to see you, I would." I closed my eyes. Every part of me wanted to say no, to turn, to push him away, but my body didn't move. We stood there in the dim light of the kitchen, the quiet humming around us like a warning and a promise, and just when it felt like something was going to break, when his hand hovered near the small of my back and my breath hitched, we heard a noise, footsteps creaking from upstairs. We both froze. The footsteps overhead were slow, deliberate, not just someone turning in bed. It was movement, purposeful, headed for the stairs. Andrew and I locked eyes. The weight of everything between us snapped tight like a wire pulled to its limit. "I should go," he whispered, already backing away from me, but not before his hand lightly grazed mine again, as if saying goodbye, or maybe just trying to hold on for 1 second longer. I moved quickly toward the sink, heart racing, trying to make it look like I'd just been finishing up. I didn't dare look toward the doorway, but I heard the floor creak at the bottom of the stairs. Then nothing. Whoever it was, probably Mr. Fletcher's home aide, or maybe his son-in-law visiting for the week, must have stopped, sensing something. I kept my back turned, letting the faucet run as I scrubbed a plate that was already clean. The silence was excruciating. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard the soft creak of the stairs again, going back up, slow, unsure, but leaving. Andrew let out a breath behind me, barely audible. I turned to him, eyes wide, adrenaline buzzing under my skin like electricity. Neither of us said a word. He just gave a small, pained nod and slipped quietly out the back door, closing it behind him with the softest click. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time after he left. My chest felt hollow and full at the same time, every nerve in my body alive with something I didn't know how to name. Guilt, relief, hunger, all of it. I poured myself tea with trembling hands, sat at the little table, and stared out the window into the night. I told myself what we almost did wasn't real, that it was just emotion and loneliness and the kind of tension that builds when two people see something in each other they're not supposed to. But deep down, I knew better. The next morning, everything felt fragile. I moved through the house as usual, checking Mr. Fletcher's vitals, straightening his linens, preparing his medications, but my thoughts kept drifting. I didn't hear from Andrew that day or the next. By the third morning, I started to convince myself it was over, that he'd come to his senses, that what we'd felt in that kitchen was a spark quickly smothered by the reality of who we were and what we could never be. Then, on the fourth night, I finished my shift and returned to the staff cottage behind the main house. The air was thick and the clouds threatened rain. I slipped off my shoes, pulled my hair back, and reached for my phone to check in with my husband. A part of me hoped he wouldn't answer, because I didn't know what version of myself I could offer him anymore. Before I could tap the screen, there was a knock on my door. 3 soft taps. I stood still, the air heavy. I opened the door, and there he was. Soaked from the mist, hoodie pulled low over his eyes, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I tried to stay away," Andrew said quietly. "I really did. I didn't invite him in. I couldn't move. I've been walking around this property for an hour. I just needed to see you again. Even if you tell me to leave, I just needed to look at you. I should have shut the door. I should have reminded him that I was married, that he was married, that this wasn't a story that ends well for either of us. But I didn't move. I didn't speak." He looked at me like he was searching for permission, or maybe forgiveness. Then the light behind us flickered. A sound from the bushes. A quick rustle. He turned. I stepped halfway out the door, peering into the dark. A voice cut through the silence. "Andrew?" We both froze. It was a woman's voice, sharp, suspicious, close. "Are you kidding me?" The voice got louder, and then footsteps. Not slow this time, fast, angry, coming straight for the cottage.
If you want more real emotional stories like this one, stick around. You might just hear one that hits close to home. Subscribe for more.